I've acknowledged that. I think I'm suggesting we just face political reality.
My Lords, I rise to support the Noble Lord Dodds of Duncairn and his giving us this opportunity, which we haven't had yet, a not real opportunity to discuss very much about what was came out earlier in the week from the Prime Minister and the EU. And I would say right away that, it's very interesting now to hear so many, not just here, but elsewhere, people now, including in the framework document itself, where every single item starts off with an attack on the protocol and how awful things were and how they weren't working. And it's very interesting because some of us have been saying that for a very long time and got quite a lot of pushback from government ministers and others who kept saying, oh no, nothing can ever change, the protocol has to stay. And of course I would say very gently to the previous Noble Lord who's just spoken that his party in Northern Ireland, which I think they have a very strong relationship with the Alliance Party, actually went along with Sinn Féin down to Dublin during the COVID regulations to actually call for rigorous implementation of the protocol. I think I may have missed it over the last few days. Maybe the Alliance Party has now decided to apologise for that nonsense of calling for rigorous implementation of something which has now been accepted by everyone was wrong and did not work. I have sympathy for the Minister, the Noble Lord Bennion, who I know there will be lots of things coming up tonight that's not really his direct responsibility, but I think he will understand that those of us from Northern Ireland do feel that we have to take every opportunity to make sure that our grievances and our strongly held views, particularly on the issue of sovereignty, are raised at every opportunity. So I want to agree with everything that Noble Lord Dodds has said, and I won't go over the specific issues on some of the pitfalls of these green and red lanes. Sufficient to say that it was disappointing that our Prime Minister so vigorously implied that now it was all sorted. The green lanes had made great difference. There was going to be no checks. I think he actually used that word, no checks. Now, I hope, like other Noble Lords, have spent a bit of time reading what the EU said just after the framework document was published. And I have to say, it is very, very different. Every single aspect. You look at what the Prime Minister said, you compare it then to what the European Union are saying, and it is very, very different indeed. And I'm afraid that that means that, once again, I think we feel that there is this positiveness coming through from government, and I understand that they want to show that they've made real changes. The reality is, as Lord Dodds has pointed out, they haven't actually made real changes. And as each day, each hour almost passes, and the detail of scrutiny of what has been agreed is examined, we find more and more that it doesn't actually live up to reality. And I look forward very much, I think just about now and perhaps later this evening, the first legal opinion. There are going to be many legal opinions over the next week or two, and it is right that the Prime Minister has said that there is time for people to study and look at this, and the first legal opinion will come out tonight on the legality, particularly, I think, relating more to the Act of Union, but on other aspects. And I think we're going to see some very strong legal opinions which will actually show that, sadly, the Prime Minister has overplayed this very, very much indeed. Now, I just want to say, particularly, just one further thing on the green lanes, because I think it is absolutely important to say, if trade between, as I've said before, a trader in Bristol trading with Birmingham and then deciding the next day trading with Belfast, part of the same United Kingdom. They must be able to trade in exactly the same way. And that is not going to happen. The Green Lane's going to have 30-odd documents and so on to fill in. And then the checks that can happen depend very much on what's in the load. If it was a genuine Green Lane, we wouldn't need a Green Lane. We would simply be sending, as we do to any other part of the United Kingdom. So Lord Dodds has gone into that in detail, and I hope that people will have the opportunity to listen to some of those people who are actually engaged in sending lorries back and forward, and just what they have to go through, and how this will actually not make very much difference. Indeed, what it will do is cause huge divergence of trade, something that was very, very important to the internal market within Great Britain and Northern Ireland. A couple of things that I just want to mention and ask the Minister if perhaps if he can't answer it, he will pass it on to someone who could. I know that perhaps the Northern Ireland office is finding it difficult to deal with all the questions that are going in because they don't necessarily have the answer. Somebody must have the answer because somebody has signed this or agreed this agreement. For example, we now understand that Northern Ireland consumers who are buying products online, which many people do, will only be able to do so if the seller is prepared to fill in customs declarations. Is that right? If export a new car for sale by a Northern Ireland dealer will have to be made to EU standards, not UK ones. And I'm afraid that to me doesn't seem like no Irish sea border. And of course at the moment the regulations might well be similar, the standards might well be similar, but eventually there will be divergence. There is absolutely no point us having left the European Union if we don't take advantage of the fact that we can diverge and that we can do things differently and live up to the standards of our own country. So could the Minister actually say, is that correct? Now, something that's perhaps more in his line of understanding. We understand that the GB Northern Ireland seed potato ban, the Minister looks more interested when we talk about seed potatoes, is not totally reversed. They will be able to be traded from grower to grower, but direct to consumer and retail packs are still excluded. So people that I know who just grow small amounts, get their seeds from Great Britain, will not still be able to have that without all the bureaucracy and paperwork that already exists. I have asked about that, and I know that the noble Lord, the Minister, Lord Keane, who's here, has been very kind to see if he can find an answer to that. Something that matters a lot to people in Northern Ireland, their pets. We've been told by Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, that great, everybody can take their pets. Need a little document. Well, in fact, what the EU say, people will be able to travel with their pets from GB to Northern Ireland. Isn't that good of the EU to let us do that? With only a simple pet document needed and a declaration by the owner that the pet will not go into the EU, i.e. go on into the Republic of Ireland. How is that going to work? Is that absolutely amazing that our own country is saying you can't take your pet, you can take it to Wales, you can take it to Scotland, but you can't take it to Northern Ireland with all of this bureaucracy and hassle. And then one of my favourite ones, which I have brought up before, and again I'd hoped that this declaration might actually have the answer. Again, something that matters to people, not a huge issue, but something that matters, and that's the question of duty-free. Since we left the European Union, duty-free was restored to Great Britain, but it's not, of course, restored to Northern Ireland. So you fly from Belfast to somewhere in the EU, and you expect to get duty-free, as you can if you fly from Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, Cardiff. You can't get duty-free because we're still in the EU single market. So then I say, right, great, so I'll be able to get from Belfast to London or Belfast to Birmingham as you can from Dublin to London. Oh no, says the Treasury, you can't do that either. Nothing in this document will say whether that has now been changed. So we can't just be left in this kind of limbo situation where when it suits the European Union, we're allowed to do something, and when it doesn't suit them, we don't. So that is another question. Duty-free, what is the situation? I'm not going to mention state aid, but anyone who's interested in that, if they look at the detail, the state aid issue has not been sorted, and neither has the VAT issue. Huge numbers of things that have not been sorted in any way to make it better. I would end by saying that, there was a most wonderful, and I'm going to give him a bit of publicity, Brendan O'Neill, who some of your lordships may know, wrote a most, I thought, brilliant article in, I'm not sure it's a regular reading for Noble Lords, but something called Spiked. And he wrote in a very amusing way, but a very serious way, about what the framework document was doing. And he said, he talks a lot about the body language between the Prime Minister and the President of the European Commission, and the fact that they obviously really, really like each other and get on well. And he said, behind the niceties, what we had here was the Prime Minister of a supposedly free nation expressing childlike glee that a foreign oligarchy had granted him permission to enact certain policies within his own boundaries. And he goes through all of the issues then that the Prime Minister was welcoming the fact that in our own country we were now going to be allowed to have medicines coming properly throughout the United Kingdom. And I genuinely would like to end by saying, I'm sorry that a lot of your noble lords genuinely don't particularly, I think everyone who's here does care about Northern Ireland, but there are obviously a lot of noble lords and indeed members of the other place who really only get interested in Northern Ireland when there's something terrible has happened or when something like this is causing problems to the government. And I would say that I would ask you all to read what the European Union has come out with this document, because this shows that I'm afraid our Prime Minister has over-egged the pudding, I think that's the right expression, and by doing so, he has actually, I think, treated Northern Ireland people as if they're just that little bit stupid and that they won't understand it. And I kind of got that feeling a little bit from, I'm sorry to be seeming to attack the noble Lord Bruce, but his attitude again was how terrible of the DUP to be even thinking that they might not go back into government. Well, it's very clear the DUP, if they do go back into the Northern Ireland Executive, are going to have to implement this protocol. Call it what you like. The basis of the protocol is still there. The fundamental issue of sovereignty is still there. This issue has not been solved. And this framework document, which I refuse to give it the name it's been given by the Prime Minister, this will not solve the issue. And I do genuinely would appeal to all noble lords to read the EU document and then to compare it to what our Prime Minister said.
I rise to express great sympathy